welcome to the show. I am so excited today because we have my absolute very favorite astrologer, Susan Miller. And I have been following Susan for so many years. She is the best astrologer, I think, in the world because the detail that she puts forth in her daily astrology and her monthly reports is so incredible, so accurate, so right on. Susan, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you.
And her website is called astrologyzone.com. Susan, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in this field?
Oh, how I got started in astrology?
Yes.
Well, my mom studied astrology before I was born for 8 years in a correspondence class. Actually, my aunt asked her to do it with her when my mother left the small town that they were living in. My aunt missed my mother, and my mother said, "You have to be kidding. I don't think astrology works." But my aunt said, "Oh, there's a lot to it. Study with me, and if you don't believe it, then you could disprove it." So my mother went in with a very critical eye and couldn't believe how well it worked. My mom's side of the family is German. She's excellent with math, and that was why my aunt kind of wrangled her into it. And they started doing charts, but my mother became a real scholar. She studied and studied and studied. She was later to say to me, "You're really lucky that you can talk about it. In my day, you couldn't. People wouldn't understand if you said you loved astrology or were an astrologer."
This is in the United States?
Yeah.
So even back then?
Yeah, Mom's German-American. My other side of the family is Italian. And I was born with a terrible birth defect that the doctors couldn't figure out, and it was extremely painful, and I would be in one hospital after another, and they just said, "We don't know what it is." I would have attacks and then they would clear up, but when I'd have an attack in the left leg, it was there for 2 months at a time, so I would miss school, and it usually would strike on holidays, like my birthday or Christmas or when the Easter Bunny came. My mother was like, "What kind of illness strikes on holidays?"
Yeah.
But she seemed to think it was associated with me being happy.
Oh.
And she was right. And she saw in the chart that when I was 14, it would be over. When I was 13 and 11 months, I had a big attack. And I wound up going to the hospital, and they still couldn't figure it out, so they went in. And I kept saying, "It's like glycerin or chocolate syrup falling on my knee." And the orthopedic surgeon said, no, it's cartilage. And I said, "That's bone." "No, it's not cartilage." He didn't believe me. I was bleeding internally. I think blood is the closest thing to chocolate syrup, as a description. And I was in the hospital a year, and in order to save my life, they had to paralyze me. When they put bands very, very strongly below your knee, you lose the use of the nerve. So when I woke up, I couldn't flex the foot, I couldn't wiggle my toes, I couldn't even feel anything. So the doctor was brilliant, and I love him. And he said, "Look, we didn't even want to put that band on. We even had other doctors come in during the surgery, and we had no choice. You were either going to lose the leg and your life. It was bad." So, I love him, and I knew he did his best. So he said, "Here's the plan. You stay in the hospital a year, we work on your circulatory system, and then you forget about high school, you study it with your mother, I don't know, but you come to the hospital every day for 6 hours a day for 3 years."
Oh my goodness.
I wanted to learn astrology to see if that was going to be worth it. Was this going to have a happy ending? I never gave up my religion. I'm a very devout Catholic. I continued to pray. I mean, astrology, some people think is a substitute for religion. It's not. But now I wanted to learn astrology, and my mother said no. And I'm like, "No,
Yeah, why is
you're
that?
an astrologer.
Exactly.
How could that be?" And she said, "You will study for a year and think you know what you're doing. You will start reading for your friends, and you won't know what you're doing." I'm like, "I don't have any friends. I'm not in school. I live home and I can't walk." We were in a 2-story walk-up. It wasn't like I was going to sneak out, on an elevator or anything. And so she still wasn't convinced. And I wrote to Horoscope magazine, and they actually answered my letter. And it looked really good for a happy ending. But now the lady who answered my letter, the editor, used terms I didn't understand. So I said to my mother, now I have to really learn. She said, you want to check the editor? I'm like, yes. She also said to me at the time, why didn't you ask me? I said, well, Mom, you're my mother. On planet Mom, there's nothing bad. You would never say I'd never walk again. My mother is the most optimistic person. That's why I'm that way. And I told her I needed a second opinion. So she left. She said, what am I going to do with you? Here's the plan. You have to study for 12 years with me. Wow. I must always be in the room. You must never read a chart without me there until I tell you you're ready. We will study astrology, but we also must study communication. If you say the wrong thing, well, that's just terrible. But if you say the right thing the wrong way, you may plant a seed in someone's mind they misunderstand, and that's almost the same as saying the wrong thing. And they may never meet another astrologer to get that straightened out. So we must learn to communicate clearly, Susan. And then we have to study theology and philosophy and why things happen, and we need to talk about life and about life's purpose. I'm like, yes, this sounds great. My mom's a little Gemini, Virgo rising, so she's very, detailed
meticulous.
And yeah. And I love her so much, and because I was so sick and she was taking me to therapy all the time, I had plenty of time with her. My sister didn't have as much time with my mother, but I was the right kid for astrology. I had that sensibility, that reflective nature that I took to it so well. So actually, she's amazed what happened. Yeah.
So was she writing for any magazines?
No, it was a secret. She didn't tell anyone.
And not for her friends either?
No.
Well, I'm
just family.
It's just amazing. You write for Elle magazine now, and
right.
What other magazines? And these are columns, astrology columns.
Yeah. Well, I write a spread for Elle every month, 2 pages. I write for Vogue Japan, W Korea, Tempo, which looks like Vanity Fair, in Turkey. It's a hashtag publication. I used to write for Eve in London with Haymarket Press, but the recession hit them. I just finished a 14-page layout for Rush magazine in Australia. It's funny, outside the U.S., I get big assignments. Whoops.
Oh, well, this is Susan's brand new calendar. It wants to make a showing, and we are going to be talking about that in the next segment. But go ahead and continue what you were talking about.
Well, outside the U.S., you get big assignments. For example, in Vogue Japan, usually at the beginning of the year, last year I had 24 pages. This year I had 12. I've had 16. They're usually big. In the U.S., you just don't get big assignments like that. In Tiempo, I just did a Valentine's Day special that runs
I would think
it's about 20 pages. Yeah.
Relationships are a big part of what you're talking about in the spreads.
No, they're usually the year ahead.
Oh.
I'm very associated with the year ahead. I like to step back and look and get the big picture. I feel frustrated when I have to just stay within a little box. Even on Astrology Zone, I'll say, don't worry if your money is tight. This new moon in 3 months, and I'll give it, is your moment when that'll get corrected if you act then. So
you keep it kind of positive, so we know the good things that are coming. And I remember reading in the past where you say you're just now getting through a very difficult part of your life, which is kind of good because you don't really talk about the negative things coming up, but we know there's problems, and there's cycles to everything, but it's good to know what is coming up. And
it is, yes.
How we first discovered you is you had some wonderful year ahead books.
Oh yeah.
And those were like massive volumes, and
they took all year to write.
They took all year to write, but I don't know how you did it before, because did you have Astrology Zone at that time also?
Yes,
oh, my
and
goodness.
I didn't have my 2 phone apps, so oh my goodness, it's just impossible. I write everything, so it's...
And it is, every word means something, and let me tell you, it is very, very, like I said, comforting to see, and I take so much, it's it's like part of my support system is going to Astrology Zone and getting your daily emails for the day and reading the monthly horoscopes, because we all go through trying times, there's ups and downs to everything, and when you read Susan Miller's reports and you see what's going on daily, it's like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what is going on today for me. Or she'll tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, and it's like a heads up. You can kind of plan your day, and
and yet it's not predestination. Astrology is good for planning, and so I'll tell you when to act and when to hold back.